Brilliant. Hello, good evening, everyone. I think we are now live on Facebook. So welcome to everyone who's joining us for How Did You Get That Job In? Thank you very much for coming along this evening. Really happy to have Robin joining us as well. We're going to make a start now because we've got a bit to get through and hopefully share with you over the course of this evening. But I just wanted to start off and introduce myself. So my name is James. I am the Careers Manager with the British Psychological Society. And I wanted to welcome you to our first ever How Did You Get That Job In live stream on Facebook. This is the first of what is hopefully many planned monthly series of live Facebook events where we'll be asking our invited guests, how did you get that job in a particular area of psychology? And the aim of these events really is to start to bring to life some of the different career pathways that are open to you if you're maybe studying psychology, if you've got an interest in psychology, or you're just generally very curious in what psychology can do. Now, I'll introduce our first speaker shortly to you, but this evening there's going to be the opportunity as audience to ask us questions throughout, and I'll be putting those to Robin to answer. We're hoping for the live stream to last around about 40 minutes to 50 minutes. Obviously, depending on how many questions we go through, will depend on how long it lasts. However, there's been quite a lot of interest in this event online. So if we don't get around or through to your question, apologies about that. We will do our best, or I'll do my best to put as many of these to Robin as possible. But I would like to welcome Robin Coakley to our live event tonight. Robin, I don't know if you just wanted to introduce yourself.
Yeah, so as you know, my name's Robin and I'm a psychological wellbeing practitioner, and I've worked as a PWP for around 2 to 3 years, I think.
Fantastic, brilliant. So we're going to kind of make a start with questions. I've got a couple of questions already, and we've been looking out on our social media channels as well over the past couple of days for questions that have been coming in when we've been doing promotion. So we've got a couple of questions to start with to ask Robin, and then please do feel to ask any questions you have, and we'll pick those up as the event goes on this evening. So thanks very much for joining us, Robin. I just wondered if you could tell us a little bit. You've mentioned that you're a psychological wellbeing practitioner at the moment, but can you tell us a bit about what you currently do in your role at the moment?
Yeah, so I think it's important to give a bit of context really to where we work, because I remember I was quite confused when I was looking into the career path. So I work within the Improving Access to Psychological Therapy service, and I think that began in around 2008. And within that kind of service, we work in a step care model. So it means that we offer the least intrusive intervention to clients first. So within that stepped care model, there's a few steps. So the first one, step one, is kind of GPs, primary care. Step two is the PWPs, and we deal with kind of mild to moderate depression, anxiety. Step three is the high intensity therapists, counsellors, and they deal with the moderate to severe depression and anxiety. And then there's step four, which is more kind of recurrent and severe depression. So within step two, we kind of offer low intensity CBT therapy. So they're quite brief interventions, around 4 to 6 sessions, half an hour. We can make them longer or shorter, kind of depending on what the client needs. We work with a variety of presentations really, so anxiety, depression, but also things like panic, OCD, social anxiety, health anxiety, things like that. So there's kind of a wide range of things we see really, and there's different ways that we deliver the therapies as well. So there's telephone sessions, we have online therapy, groups face to face. They've taken a bit of a backseat with the COVID. That's the kind of modalities that we use.
Brilliant. That's really interesting, Robin. Thank you. So how did you decide to get into this particular role? What motivated you to become a psychological wellbeing practitioner?
So I think I didn't really know about this all in university. I hadn't really heard much about it. But the one thing I knew is that I wanted to kind of go into a psychological career, really. And just because, I enjoy that. I enjoy, talking to people about their experiences. I'd worked within quite a few different kind of healthcare settings, so charities, hospitals, and different steps within the stepped care model. And it was that one-to-one, the client-facing aspect that I really kind of enjoyed. So as a PWP, you do see a lot of clients one-to-one. That's the majority of the work, I'd say. So the role, it was quite unique, it's quite new, and my experience kind of tallied in well with what they wanted. So when I saw it come up, I thought, that's definitely for me, really. But yeah, it's more so that kind of motive to get into the psychological career, if that makes sense.
Brilliant. Yeah, that's really, really interesting. Just hearing about your motivations and what really interested you about that, I think is really fascinating. And everyone's going to have different motivations when it comes to a career within the psychological workforce.
Exactly, yeah.
So that's really interesting. So my next question is just in terms of when you decided that that's the area that you wanted to get into.
Mhm.
How did you go about qualifying? What was the route that you specifically took into this role?
So I took the kind of standard route, so the trainee PWP position. So with that, you usually have a degree in psychology beforehand, and then have some experience in maybe different kind of healthcare settings, psychology settings. Um, and so I trained, it was October 2019 to October 2020. So in that kind of training year, we have 1 day a week of university as well as kind of clinical work ongoing. So that's the kind of the standard route, so 1 year, and then you qualify as a PWP. However, there are different routes. So there's the assistant PWP trainee route, and there's the apprenticeship PWP trainee route, which are quite new. So would you want me to tell you a bit about the kind of routes into them, or from what I know, really?
If you know about them, that would be really
Yeah,
interesting if you're
no,
happy to share
that's
that with
fine.
me.
So I think this can be a bit confusing because they can be advertised as different things. So with the assistant PWP trainee post, it can also be advertised as an assistant practitioner. So with this post, I think it's a 2 year kind of course, and you're working to support the PWP team within step 2, whilst also kind of undertaking a health and social care foundation degree. And for that, you don't need a degree in psychology. It can be like lived experience. It can be, wanting to get into mental health. So it's really a good way to kind of diversify the workforce, really. And I know a lot of people will stay in that role, or they'll go on for the PWP training if they want to. The apprenticeship route. So again, this is quite a new route in. So this could be if you have health experience, lived experience. But with this, it's a 15-month course. So the standard route is 12. So there's additional 3 months, I think. But you don't need a degree in psychology. So typically it could be like support workers, care workers, people in them kind of helping roles that can come in through that route. But it's a really good way because if you've got that interest in psychology, but you haven't necessarily got the psychology degree, it can be a nice way in. And we do see you get more people, more of a different workforce, which is beneficial for everyone, including clients, really.
Brilliant. That's really good to see, actually, the fact that there's that breadth now of different opportunities or different ways to enter into those professions, which is really good to see. So it's not just open to people with a psychology degree, that those with an interest in psychology or like you said, a lived experience can start to work towards that pathway. We've had a really good question relating to a point you just actually made. So I'm just going to pull that out of our chat, actually. So you were saying that you prior to kind of going into the role, you'd got a bit of experience, and someone that's watching live has just asked, what kind of experience did you have before applying for the PWP role?
Right. Yeah, no, it's a good question, really, because I think, you know, you look through the person specification on the application form and the entry requirements, and it can still feel a bit vague. So for me, I worked as a support worker for a year. I'd also worked in a domestic violence charity, and I'd done a honorary assistant psychologist post in step 4. So that was my kind of experience, as well as kind of like voluntary, kind of weaved in, and I built up quite a bit of experience. But the routes that people come into it from can be quite broad, really. So a lot of my colleagues will have worked on the wards, and just in the hospital. So there's a wide range of experience. I think it's more so how you reflect on it, really, and how you kind of prove I've got all them kind of the person spec against that, because we've all got very different experiences, so it's just kind of tying that in and what you learn from them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think one of the key points as well about what you said there is that it's all about that reflecting on your skills and understanding the experience you gained,
Yeah.
and how those skills transfer into that
Yeah,
role as well. So transferable skills is really important.
definitely, because I think, you know, people could have the same experience, it's just how you look at it and how you reflect on it and what you've learned, really.
Yeah. Definitely. I think that's really key. Thinking then kind of into the future, you've mentioned about how you got into becoming a PWP. In terms of your own career progression, and this is probably the $1,000,000 question in terms of your career, but if you know, where do you see your career progressing
It's a good
after
question, really. Yeah.
PWP? So
Yeah, no, and I think with the PWP position, you do get a lot of skills, and within the role. So, for example, I've just started my supervisor training course, so that's kind of a way to progress in the role. There's also senior posts as well. So, if you decided, you know, after a few years of experience, I'd like to be a senior, then that's an option. Um, we also do kind of training, you know, in long-term conditions, so you can kind of specialize in them, and a lot of my colleagues have and work with clients with long-term conditions. So there's a lot of kind of ways to progress within the PWP role. We also have things called a champion role. So within my service, we have kind of an area or a demographic that we look at, and try and look at the resources that are available in the local community, and what support's available. So we'll have got a champion for older adults, we've got a champion for the LGBTQIA community, and my champion role is gender-based violence, domestic violence. So it gives you kind of a opportunities to look into what you're passionate about, really. However, if you didn't really want to stay in the PWP role, there is other options. So, for example, I know people who've gone on for the high intensity therapy training following a few years working as a PWP, because they've thought, this is quite like this environment, I quite like the CBT based interventions, and want to kind of improve their knowledge on that. I know people have completely left that and gone into research. Some people have gone on to the counselling psychology doctorate, the clinical psychology doctorate. So there's so many different routes. It's just what you kind of want. And at the moment, I think I'm quite enjoying progressing in the PWP kind of role in terms of the supervisor and the champion role. But that's the thing. There's so many kind of options, really, and I think because it's not a new role, but it's quite new. It's evolving constantly.
yeah.
So,
Yeah, I think that's a really good point that you've made there in terms of the different opportunities that exist. It's not just a case of when you go into the PWP role, there are lots of opportunities for progression. And similarly to your kind of deciding that the PWP was the right step for you, actually
yeah,
journey into that and the progression in that role is going to be really individual as well. And I think from the sounds of things, the role allows you to start to explore some of those as well. It's certainly not going to close any doors for you in psychology.
Yeah, exactly. And as a PWP, you work with a wide range of people, so from 16 to whatever age really. So you really get to see what you enjoy, and if there's particular clients you really want to work with, you kind of get that experience really.
Yeah, I think that's really good. It's good opportunity as well in terms of your career progression and actually developing your skills and expertise. So thank you for that. I'm going to move on to a question actually that we've had from one of our social media channels earlier on in the week, from someone just asking, when in the year are PWP roles advertised usually?
Right, so I think that there's two cohorts, two intakes each year. So there's a March intake and an October intake. This might change, but when I was applying, this is what was happening. So for the March intake, I'd say if you're looking to apply for that, keep an eye on NHS jobs for maybe January, February, kind of the start of the year, maybe December, kind of around that time. And for the October intake, I think I applied end of August, start of September. So that's when they start coming up. So there's two intakes, and I think as well you have the assistant PWP roles coming up as well. So they all kind of come up around the same time. But if you were kind of unsure, you can always go onto the university website that is doing the training for that PWP course. So when you're doing your training, you'll be linked to a university. So you can look at when them term dates start and a bit more information, if you want to have a little bit more background on that. But yeah, two intakes around March and October.
Brilliant, thank you for that. So it's all about kind of being prepared, checking those out, looking on the NHS jobs website as well, and being ready to go with an application for that. Brilliant. And we've had a few questions come through whilst we've been talking. Please do keep questions coming, because we'll try and answer them all. But just following up on the work experience question, did you find you did all of your work experience, was it whilst you were studying, or was it after you had graduated, or was it a mixture of both?
So it was a bit of a mixture of both. So during my degree, I was trying to get as much kind of voluntary experience as I could, just to kind of test the water and see, what demographic, what kind of role I wanted to go into. So I did a little bit there, but most of it came after my degree, because obviously there's a lot of work in your degree and you don't want to be taking on too much. But no, it was after I got my degree, I then went on to do a support worker role, and then following on from that, that's when I got built up the kind of experience. But did bits here and there within my degree, especially kind of around summers and weekends, and try and get something in there and just try and see what I was interested in really.
Brilliant. And you've already talked about the route that you took to qualify to that, but linked to that, when you were actually applying, what were the actual steps you went through to actually become to get recruited into that training post? Was it like an application and then an interview? Could you tell us a bit about your experience in that?
Yeah, that's fine. So it was an application, and again that was just through NHS jobs, looking at the person spec and then looking at how my experiences fitted in with that. And then I had an interview. I think the interview was, I think it was around half an hour. It wasn't too long, it wasn't too intense, maybe around half an hour to an hour. So within that, I think they asked me around 6 questions. I know some services do a role play within the interview, but mine service didn't. But again, it's just the application and the interview. From what I can remember, that's how I got it.
Fantastic. Yeah. So again, that would probably be quite common in this area. So anyone that's thinking of applying, being prepared for that. And I think, like you said as well, the point you made earlier on as well about that, reflecting on your your skills that you had gained, your experience, and how that fit into the role of a PWP. That's probably really valuable to getting into that area, I would assume.
No, definitely, and it's something you can draw upon then in your interview as well. Reflections are a big part of the application.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much. So another question that we've had is, in your role, or when you applied for your role, could you choose whether you worked with children, adults, young people, people with SPLD, etc.? Could you choose the kind of client group you work with?
So no, not really. A short answer is no. So we work with adults, so 16 and above. We see it's a kind of a cross section really of everyone, lots of different presentations, and it can be quite daunting, I think, when you go in as a new kind of therapist, as a new practitioner. There is the opportunity to kind of like train in the long-term conditions. So if you wanted to, you could work more specifically with clients with long-term conditions. But no, it is more kind of general, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, definitely. Thank you. That's again helpful to know for people when they're deciding, I think, what area or the client group they want to work with as well. We've had another really good question, and the issue around kind of burnout within the role, and just saying, how do you find? I suppose how do you find you manage your caseload and look after yourself in the role as well? So how do you take self-care as such?
It is that's a really important kind of point, really, because the PWP role is quite intense. You have a high caseload, around 7 contacts a day, so it is quite intense. That varies between service to service, but a good thing about IAPT, the service we work within, is we have weekly supervision. So I have an hour supervision that's protected that I have every week, and that's again for kind of reflecting on cases, anything that went well, anything that went badly, anything I want to learn. So that's a good way to kind of offload almost. We also have a wellbeing champion. So just as I said before, we all have our different kind of groups, our different demographics we look at. We have a wellbeing champion who can organise little events for us, or will give us resources. But another key aspect, completely outside of the role, is having things for yourself, having things that you enjoy. I love psychology. I'm really interested in psychology, but I also have my other things that I do outside. Just, and especially with COVID and working from home, you've got to have that kind of separation of, okay, 5 o'clock, and then it's my time to do what I want to do. But yeah, it is really important to look after yourself in this role, because burnout can be quite common.
Brilliant. Thank you. I think that's really, really good advice in terms of hopefully reassuring to people actually that within the role there is that support. So there's the support networks more kind of informally, but you've got that reflective practice space as well to practice in. And I think having that work-life balance as well, having that where you can actually switch up and just do something you really enjoy as well as part of it, I think is really important. So thank you for giving that reassurance to people. I think that's important to sharing that. Sorry, carry on.
There's different forms of supervision as well. So you also have clinical skills once a month, which is a group supervision, which can be really useful just for kind of bouncing ideas off people. And you also have line management. So there is a lot of supervision and there is support there.
Brilliant. That's very reassuring to hear as well, I think, for people, hopefully. So in terms of the role itself, another question we've had come in is it an assessing role or a counselling role, or is it a combination of both, would you say?
So it's a combination of both. So we do the assessments, so we'll get referrals, could be from a GP, and we'll do what we call an initial screening assessment, which is usually around 45 minutes, where we kind of talk to the client about what's going on, what they'd like out of therapy, look at their goals. So there is an assessment part of it. But then you also have the interventions. So alongside that, which will be part of my week, I'll also have my ongoing clients. So we do screenings each week, but there's a good mixture of both, really.
Brilliant. So you've got that, I suppose, that variety in the role as well, which is really good and probably helps you as well. It's, I suppose, no two days or no two client work you're going to do is ever going to be the same, really.
Oh, exactly. You could have 3 screenings in the day, and they could all be completely different. And then the next day you've got sessions, which again is a different dynamic again.
Brilliant, thank you. So another couple of questions we've had in are around kind of the actual university side of things as well. So when you were just to clarify from what you were saying, someone said, how do you know which university to apply for training with? Was that part of your kind of application when you made it to the NHS that you got to choose that, or?
So I think different services have a university that they're kind of affiliated to. So I didn't apply to the university. I think some people will have someone from the university in their interview panel. But no, I didn't apply to the university. I applied through the NHS, and they kind of sort that out.
Yeah. And we've got I'm just having a look through, see if we've got any more questions. So just in regards to kind of the university experience side of things, another question we had is around paying. Do you have to pay for university training? My understanding is it's included with the trust, the NHSU trust pays for that training. Was that in your case?
Yeah, so it's fully funded, the course. So luckily, we didn't have to worry about them fees.
Brilliant. Another really good question we've got come in. So what would you say are the most challenging aspects of the role? And likewise, what are the most rewarding parts of the role for you?
So the challenging is definitely, what we touched on before, is that the high caseload. And although we work with mild to moderate anxiety, sometimes it can be more moderate, just with the nature of the step care model, really. So the challenging aspect is the caseload. You do have to have them time management skills. You have to have your diary planned quite efficiently, really. So that's the challenging aspect. But the most rewarding for me is client feedback, and in sessions when you have that kind of moment of, oh, that's kind of what I want to do, or that's how I'm going to face that problem. That's really rewarding. And also as well, my colleagues, working with people who are like-minded, really supportive. I think that's a massive rewarding part of the job as well.
Brilliant, thank you. I think there's some really good reasons there in terms of what, if people are listening, what might motivate them to kind of go into this area, that the reward from it, working, seeing that success that your interventions directly have on people's lives must be fantastic and quite poignant right now.
Yeah, and it's a privilege, to be able to speak to people and they'll open up and have that kind of safe space with a person. It is a real privilege, and it's very rewarding. Despite its challenges, it is very rewarding.
Brilliant, thanks, Robin. So another question from one of the people viewing is, how competitive did you find it to get onto the PWP training?
Right, so it is quite competitive. So for me, it was all right. I had my interview and was offered the job. But it is, people do apply a few times. So it is competitive, but hopefully these new routes in will be helpful in terms of that. But yeah, I would say don't be disheartened about that, and go for it. If you've got the experience, really try for it.
Would there be any kind of top tip you would give to people in terms of not necessarily making themselves more competitive, but how to, for the recruitment process and getting through that, what would be your top tip to people applying?
So there's a few documents I'd say to read. There's the reach out manual, And that can be really beneficial because that's what we kind of refer back to in training. So I'd say read that and getting an idea of kind of the work we do. Also, maybe look at current events in the NHS. I think that's always a really important thing to be looking at, and what impact would that have on IAPT, and how could the role progress, or what you want out of the role. But as I said before, it's that reflecting, so looking at the person's specification and thinking, how does that fit for me? Is that something I've done? Is that something I can work on?
Brilliant, thank you. That's a really great tip. Another question we've had come in just involves kind of day to day, what your role looks like. So someone's asking, could you give us an example of what a typical day in your role looks like?
Yeah. So every day is kind of different. So if we'll go for a Monday, maybe. So you could start off the day with maybe screening assessments. So you could have 3 screening assessments, looking into what the client's goals are, what's the most appropriate form of therapy. And then the afternoon, it could be one-to-one sessions. They can be over the phone, over video. There's also online CBT, so we might do that as well through a program called Silver Cloud. So every day is kind of different, but you do have a admin afternoon in the week as well, just to catch up on any letters that you might need to send, any notes. So it is kind of varied, but that's the kind of average day. If that makes sense.
And I suppose following on from that, another question is, in terms of working with colleagues, so do you work with colleagues as a team to assess cases, or is it just down to your decision?
So we'll assess the client on the call, but can take that to supervision and discuss that with our supervisor and kind of go through the different options, because it's always useful to have that kind of second voice of, well, what do you think, and bounce it off of that person. But again, it's with the client as well, so looking at what they want out of therapy, if that makes sense. So initially it's you one-to-one doing the call, but then you can bring that to supervision and tutoring.
Yeah, so you've got that support just to kind of help with your kind of decision making as well, and that's again a really good skill, I think, to develop in that as well. That's brilliant.
Definitely.
So following on from that as well, you work quite closely with your supervisor. In terms of other kind of healthcare professionals in your job, are there any other kind of key people that you work with in those settings in your day-to-day role?
Yeah, I think within the role there's a lot of kind of working within teams, liaising with different teams. We get the referrals from GPs, so it can be talking and liaising with GPs. The high intensity therapists as well, we'll speak a lot with them, because we can refer on to them. We can also ask them for advice and support. There's also clinical psychologists within my service that we can ask questions, and then we have our admin team, which are amazing and kind of coordinate our clients. So there's a lot of different people we talk to, as well as kind of outside services, so like domestic abuse services or whatever the case may be, if you need to signpost clients.
Yeah, and I think that then, I think on top of that, it allows you to grow your own professional network as well, in terms of thinking about your career. So you mentioned about kind of some people decide to maybe go into, or to look at pursuing clinical psychology once they've worked in a PWP role for a while, and that can actually working with those professionals can actually help you decide, is this the right option for me as well? Is it kind of help shape your own career journey? That's really interesting. Thank you.
100%, yeah.
Right, I'm just having a quick look through. So another question we've had was, would you have any advice for recent psychology graduates around gaining clinical experience? So this is a question that comes up quite a lot at some of our events, but would there be any advice you would give to people that are maybe have graduated, especially over the last 2 years, in terms of getting that clinical experience? Anything that you've come across that's worked?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, because I think coming out of your degree, it can feel so daunting, and there's so many different opportunities, but then it can feel like you have none. So for me, I went into support work, but if you can't find a role that you want, or that's going to give you that experience, it might be looking into voluntary. And obviously, not everyone can afford to do voluntary, so it might be once a week or once every few weeks. But I'd say look into that, and support work can be a good way to kind of see what you're interested in. But it's a really hard one, and I think you just have to keep looking at what's coming up on the jobs, because they're changing constantly.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point of just being aware of what's out there, kind of looking at jobs. Also, I don't know if you've engaged with them, but one of the things that we speak about quite regularly at our kind of careers events is the Psychological Professionals Network in England. The regional networks there have given, like, some of our members in the past, the opportunity to actually start to explore more about what the role is, get them in with some of the people that do that, gain an understanding, and start to network and possibly uncover opportunities. So that's a good network that I would recommend for people to think about as well. So just going to look at a few more questions we've got. We seem to be having quite a few questions coming in, which is absolutely brilliant. And thank you for those that are asking questions. We will do our best to get through as many as possible. So another question that we've had as well is around kind of measuring success in the role. And I'm going to kind of ask this two ways. I suppose firstly to you, Robin, how do you personally measure like success in your role? What makes you go, actually, I did that really well?
That's a good question, actually. I think it's the kind of client feedback, and also the kind of feeling you get. That is a really good question. You've got me thinking now. I think it's the client feedback, really, that makes you feel, oh, I've accomplished something, or just that feeling in yourself. So it might, a session may not have gone well, or it may not have gone as well as you hoped. But if you can have that kind of confidence in your ability, that can be the success. But for me, I think it would be the feedback that you get.
Yeah, and that then helps with things like motivation and kind of keeping going when you have to kind of be a bit resilient as well. So that's really nice to hear as well. So thank you. And then I don't know whether it's on the flip side of that, but in terms of, I suppose, your manager or your service manager, how would they measure success in the role? What would be the kind of key performance indicators that they would be looking at in terms of what is the success for them, do you think?
So I think there's a kind of a wide variety that they look at. I think access rate to new people coming in, but also recovery, looking at if the interventions are beneficial. And it's kind of quite difficult to quantify success in therapy and in psychology. So I think from a purely removed perspective, it would be recovery rates. But that's something we try not to put too much emphasis on, really, within the role. So you would never kind of be penalised, or it's more so looking at your own progression. It's not looking at what is success and what is not success. But recovery rates, I suppose, would be how they measure it.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that, Robin. I'm just having a quick look at a few more questions. So in terms of when you were working towards kind of gaining experience for that, how did you kind of manage that, I suppose, in terms of kind of managing the costs with that as well? So you mentioned about kind of doing voluntary work, working as a support worker. How did you kind of manage that and manage your time as well as kind of financially, I think? How did you go about doing that?
Yeah, so it is difficult, and I think because of the nature of how competitive psychology can be, a lot of people can burn themselves out because they're trying to take on so much, voluntary and paid. So what I did, I was a support worker, but alongside that I did a voluntary position, so I was still earning some money, I could still pay the bills, but I did have some extra kind of experience. So it is difficult, and I think you've got to prioritise your own well-being first, rather than stretching yourself too thin. If that makes sense. But it is a difficult one to answer, really, because it is tough.
Yeah, it is very challenging, I think, as well, especially as kind of over the past couple of years we've seen the opportunities to gain experience with the pandemic has kind of reduced those down. Which leads me on to another question that I had, was just around in terms of the adaptations that your service has made over the past 2 years. Obviously, there's been a lot of change with COVID taking place. How has your kind of role changed over the past 2 years, and how have you managed that change?
So initially, when I began the role, we were all working within the service, so there was no home working. So that changed, and we started working remotely. So that was a bit of a shift for a lot of people, because again, the boundaries of home life and work can become blurred, especially if you're working in your living room, or you don't have like that designated office space, really. In terms of kind of adaptations, so we were trying to put together online groups, but a lot of the kind of modalities can be done without doing that face-to-face work. So with telephone working, with video working, with the online CBT, the adaptations were there really for us to use. So luckily we had them kind of things in place to be able to work remotely with the restrictions.
Brilliant. And then I suppose in terms of within your own career, how did you manage that change? What you've mentioned some of the wellbeing things that you've done. Was there anything else that you used to manage that change from kind of all in service to more face-to-face to more online delivery?
Yeah, I think that's when your colleagues come in, and kind of listen with them and seeing what tips and tricks they've got, how they've been finding it, because it can normalise the experience for you, then just talking through how you're feeling. That's what I'd say for that. But it is difficult, and I think it's an ongoing thing that you do need to keep looking at, really, and making sure you do have that kind of cut off and you are talking to your colleagues. Yeah.
Brilliant. I think that's really important as well. I'm conscious that we're coming to the end of our questions. I think we tried to answer as many as possible, so apologies if we haven't got around to your question or weren't able to answer it. There were a few in there. I can see a few people have helped out with questions as well, in terms of training and funding. So thank you to those people that have answered those. But I just wanted to finish with the last question. If you had to pick kind of the one thing that you would use to kind of recommend the PWP role to people, what would that be? What is the best thing about being a psychological wellbeing practitioner?
So I think it's that one-to-one work, really. I think before I went into this role, I didn't have that, really. I'd done, as I said, support work and worked in charities, but I hadn't had that building that relationship of that one-to-one sessions for that maybe a short time, but it can be really rewarding. So that's my favourite thing about the role, that kind of relationship you build with the client.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And I think that brings us to the end of the questions tonight. All that I wanted to say, Robin, to you firstly is thank you so much for giving up your time and for coming along and just sharing your career journey with us. It's been really, really insightful in answering the questions, just to kind of see what you get out of the role. What are the challenges? I think that's really important for people to consider if they're thinking of going into it, but also for just sharing your journey into it. It's been really interesting to hear about, and the steps that you took and the experience you got, and hopefully we've inspired some people to look into this in a little bit more detail, in terms of the psychological wellbeing practitioner role. and the roles that are connected to it. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you as well to those that tuned in to watch this live. It's been great to have you here. We've had some really good questions. I apologise if we haven't got round to answering everyone's questions. I was trying to pick up as many as possible in the chat. But I just wanted to say that we are planning with these how did you get that job in live streams on Facebook. We are planning to run them once every month. It will be on the first Tuesday of each month. So our next one will be on Tuesday the 5th of April. So please do keep following and engaging with the BPS on our social media channels to find out more about that over the next few weeks. And please do join us to find out more about that. In the meantime, if you are interested in finding out any more, we do have, if you're a pre-higher education student, so if you're pre-university, either studying A-levels or Highers, we do have our Your Future in Psychology event, which is taking place on Wednesday the 30th of March, which you can sign up for on the BPS website, where we're welcoming speakers to talk about their research and where psychology can lead you. And if you are a student from Ireland, all of Ireland, we have got this coming Saturday. We're running jointly with the Psychology Society of Ireland, the Opportunities in Ireland, Your Career in Psychology, where the event will be looking in a bit more detail at the different career pathways that are open to students either in the Republic of Ireland or in Northern Ireland as well. So it covers the whole of Ireland. Robin, thank you once again very much for joining me this evening. And thank you everyone for coming along. Thank you very much for your time tonight. Have a great evening, everyone. And we hope to see you at our next How Did You Get That Job In event. Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.